Hello, everyone. Thursday. Can you believe last week it was almost Good Friday and, we were heading into the long weekend. It's been an incredibly short week. Just to follow up from the account management series, I talked to you last time about how account managers are responsible for revenue growth. They're not glorified customer service people, but in order to make sure that they understand that, they also need to have a very clear pathway forward. So the first thing I talked about last time was about understanding their portfolio of accounts and realizing that in order to reach their growth target, they can't expect that just to happen organically with their bank of existing clients. While there'll be some incremental improvements in spend, some of that might be price driven. What they also need to be is proactive so that they're growing share of wallet, but they're also growing their portfolio size. Sometimes account managers don't see their role as including new business, but inevitably, if you're not increasing the bank of clients that you've got as an account manager, it's got a shelf life. So you need to constantly be replenishing it so that it's fresh. And as people start to change and morph and leave, you've got that ongoing supply of good quality clients in your portfolio. So I talked about knowing your portfolio and knowing who's in growth, which accounts or clients are going to be, not able to grow this year for whatever reason. And that doesn't mean that they're not still going to spend significant amounts. It just might not grow this year. And that's fine, but you still need a strategy. It's not a set and forget. So what's your fortification and protection strategy? And then finally, which are the accounts that are in jeopardy or you could run the risk of losing, or you actually want to let go of because their cost to serve is not worth it. It's not commercial anymore. And when you identify those, my argument would be you need to replace them. So whether it's the account manager who's directly responsible for identifying and replenishing new, or whether they need to be working with acquisition in order to have that conversation so that they're not only plugging those holes, but they're also plugging the holes that will inevitably be there from loss of profit from some of those accounts, or improving profit where there's negative margin on some of those accounts. So that's the first part. Once they understand what percentage of their portfolio is in each of those three buckets, growth, maintenance, or replacement, then they can apply a strategy that's going to be appropriate to those accounts. So today I wanted to talk to you about account growth and just some really, 4 key areas that account managers can start to build insight around in order to not only identify what the growth strategy is, but how to realize growth in their accounts. So without going into too much detail, those 4 things are understanding the business at a broader level, because unless you do that, you're going to be transactional. If you're transactional, you become a commodity. If you're a commodity, you're going to be evaluated on price and availability, price and product. And, that's a race to the bottom. So you need to align yourself to what else is going on in the business, what the business's priorities are, in order to make sure that your product or service is relevant. And then you're more likely to have take-up, growth, and retention. So understanding the broader business, understanding also who really makes the decisions. So there's an obvious decision maker, of course, but who else is influencing or who's in the decision maker's ear? So I'll talk about that. Where is the opportunity? So thinking about, how you actually start to crystallize, where that growth's going to come from. So I'll talk about that. And then finally, understanding or getting the customer to understand the value and how they define value. What's their measure of value? It can't be anything that you can't put a number against. It's just too nebulous. So, again, account managers need to have the skill to be able to lead the customer or the client to articulate that measure of value for them, because everyone's measure of value is going to be different. That simple. But we need to be facilitators of conversations rather than directors or tellers. And again, the quality of our questions will be the determinant about the quality of our outcomes. So let's go back to the start, and starting by understanding what's going on in the business. So things like, especially at the moment where there's so much pressure on businesses, you need to understand what the impacts of some of those economic or market forces is having on the business in terms of decision making around product, suppliers, staffing, growth, location, all of those different areas, so that you can begin to build a bit more of a picture across the next 12 to 24 months, so that you can see the general direction. That will give you an indication of where you're going to go next, not just today, right? That's what account management is. We're not transactional, we're relationship based. So also thinking about things like, their customers' buying patterns, how that's affecting the business, what they're noticing, what's happening, why they think that's happening, and what they're doing about it, where they're struggling, for example. And again, just understanding that it may or may not directly or indirectly relate to your product or service, but you need to have that picture in order to create relevance there. Understanding what their priorities for the business are coming up in the next 12 to 24 months, and not just understanding what they are, but what's sitting behind those priorities. What are the business drivers that are making those things a priority? Also, what's holding them back? What's holding them back across the business? If they've got a big piece of software to implement, a lot of their thinking and decision making is going to be all around that, and they might not have room for anything new, for example. Or if they're moving, or if they're downsizing, or if they're, looking at new hires, or they've got a big hole in one of their territories that they need to fill. That you just really need to understand the timing of those issues, the impact of those issues, and the flow-on impact of those issues around lots of other areas of the business, remembering that any one area is connected to another. And then also the second part, so we looked at the bigger business issues, then who really makes the decision? So most of us think about the key decision maker or the commercial decision maker, the person that gives you the okay, writes the check, in the old language, showing my age there, but the person that signs off on working with you. So of course there's them, but that's usually where a lot of account managers stop. They don't understand that sitting around that decision maker are a lot of other influencers who have a major level of influence over that decision maker, or a minor level. They might also be technical decision makers. So whether this is going to fit into what else they've got going on, it might also be users of the product or service. And unless they like the solution or product that you're putting forward, or that you already or that they're already using, and you understand how that helps them, what their measure of value is, you're simply going to miss out on an opportunity. Because if it's not working for them, guess what? They'll be telling the decision maker, and all of a sudden this great relationship that you've got, this might still be a great relationship, but the key decision maker may not decide to work with you again because of the feedback from the user. So you need to build your insight, you need to round out your insight, and you need to have relationships strengthened across the organization and also through the organization. Otherwise, you just weaken the relationship with your organization. You simply do. And there might be times too for you to bring someone in who's above you and perhaps below you in terms of org structure, so that they can meet their equivalents in the organization too, just to reinforce the bond between the two organisations. You also need to identify blockers. Sometimes we don't even think about, who might be in the decision maker's ear about someone else, or not to go ahead because they think they can solve that problem internally. So sometimes when we lose either a proposal or a tender or or even just an opportunity to grow an existing opportunity, we think it's down to price. And it's sometimes what our customers tell us, because they don't quite know how to tell us that they took they've listened over here and they agree with them. Especially if you've got a good relationship, that can be kind of a tricky one to have. They don't want to ruin what they've got, but you're going to be the loser for not understanding who those blockers are, and then having a strategy around fencing them off, or understanding, well, what is the strength of that influence. And then also, how are decisions made, for the services like yours, so is it tender? Is it a formal request for proposal? Who else needs to see this proposal? So sometimes we think, oh, it's that person, but all of a sudden you realize they've got a presentation to make to the board. Well, who's on the board? What questions are they likely to ask you or ask that person? Are they armed with the information to do that? Is that something that you can be a part of? Again, what's the time frame? How long does that decision usually take? And again, that will determine how on point or not your communication in terms of follow-up once you've submitted that proposal is. Also, where the opportunity lies, so things like size, scope, you need to understand that. What's the urgency? What's their budget? And what's the impact of your solution on the business? So that follows on to the fourth area that I talked about, and that is value. So if they take up the service or product, what does success look like for them, and how are they going to measure that? And sometimes it's the first time, if you dare to ask questions like that of your customers, it might be the first time that they've ever been asked that. So they might not really know how to answer it. So you need to have supporting questions to help walk them through to get that measure of value. Once you've got that, it really tightens up the way that you position the pricing and the solution that you're providing, so that it's a no-brainer for the customer. You need to also understand, if they take up this product or service of yours, what's the impact downstream and upstream in the business? How does it save other areas in the business time, money? How does it make them look good? What does that look like? What's the impact of that? And what else do you need to know? So I hope that today has given you 4 key areas to go back to your account management team and have a bit more of a thorough conversation about where the work lies for them. And make sure, leaders, that you're always going out in field, observing and providing feedback based on what you're seeing, so that you're helping your account managers to build their capacity. I'll see you next week with what a fortification and protection strategy might look like.